The night she whispered baby, the room did not explode, it froze. Crystal glasses stopped trembling. Cigarette smoke hung in the air like a bad omen. Across the table, Damien Moretti, cold, elegant, lethal, turned his head with the patience of a man deciding whether mercy was more terrifying than murder. Evelyn stood there in a cheap server uniform, one unpaid hospital bill away from collapse, not knowing that a single slip of the tongue had just rewritten her destiny. In that moment, under dim lights and loaded silence, a waitress did not meet a monster. She walked into a tragedy.
A single term was uttered, and the most combustible room in New York became a vacuum. It was the sort of verbal misstep that, within this brutal hierarchy, was a death warrant. When Evelyn whispered the word baby, flanked by armed and restless figures, she had erased the predator before her. Damien Moretti, the absolute sovereign of the East Coast. Any other man would have drawn pleas for his life. Damien, however, cared little for predictable scripts. He closed the distance, his expression a mask, and gave an order meant to dismantle her reality. Repeat it, but slower. The oppressive heat of the Obsidian Room's kitchen felt a universe away from the glacial control of the main lounge. Evelyn Van daubed sweat from her forehead, the fabric of the server's uniform scratching her skin. She was a foreign body in this ecosystem, an NYU paralegal student submerged in debt, not a purveyor of luxuries to the criminal class. An urgent plea from her sister, Sarah, for $5,000 to cover her daughter, Lily's emergency operation, had forced her into this precarious position. The Obsidian Room was less a club than a hidden fortress concealed within an unassuming Tribeca facade. Here, the city's power brokers held conversations too toxic for any recording device. Table 4 requires another Louis Vance. The floor manager, Mr. Henderson, a man constructed entirely of nerves, hissed as he pushed a tray toward her. And you will not meet anyone's gaze. If you let that bottle fall, your existence is worth less than its contents, Evelyn affirmed with a nod, her pulse a frantic drum. She touched the concealed Bluetooth device in her ear, maintaining an open channel to a panicked Sarah at the hospital. For her sister, she kept the line live, muting her end as she moved toward the main floor. I can't manage this, Evie. Sarah's fractured sobs came through the earpiece. The surgeon said, if I can't produce a deposit in the next 60 minutes. Evelyn passed through the velvet partition into the lounge, where the very composition of the air shifted. The atmosphere was a blend of expensive cigars, worn leather, and the subtle, metallic tang of firearms cloaked in cologne. The low light threw long silhouettes from men in $5,000 Brioni suits. Table 4 was isolated in a corner, shielded by a partition of smoked glass. Seated there was a man who appeared sculpted from marble and pure menace, Damien Moretti. Even Evelyn, immersed in legal texts, recognized his face. The press painted him as a shipping tycoon. The underworld called him the Reaper. He was locked in a tense dialogue with a rival, Lucas, from the Russo Syndicate. The friction was a tangible force. Damien's hand was on the table, seemingly at ease, yet his knuckles were stark white. Evelyn moved forward, her own hands trembling as she went to clear the empty tumblers. You believe you can intimidate me off the waterfront? Damien's voice was a deep, resonant vibration of absolute menace. I erected those docks. Eras change, Damien, Lucas retorted with a sneer. Perhaps you've lost your edge. In Evelyn's ear, Sarah's weeping intensified into panic. I am going to lose her, Evelyn. I am going to lose my baby. Evelyn's composure fractured. In a devastating lapse, forgetting her position between two warring syndicate heads, she unmuted her microphone to offer a word of solace. She leaned forward to set a coaster near Damien's hand. In that exact instant, Damien brought his fist down on the table to drive home his argument. Evelyn recoiled from the sudden aggression, jarring cognac bottle into a precarious wobble. In the chaotic motion, her gaze fixed on the table, she murmured urgently into the device, "It's fine, baby, just breathe. I am taking care of it." The ensuing silence was total. The club's ambient music continued, but around table 4, existence had paused. Lucas's expression was one of pure disbelief, his gaze darting between the server and the Dawn. The 3 enforcers behind Damien became statues, their hands ghosting toward their jackets. Evelyn stood paralyzed as the gravity of her error descended upon her. She was not looking at her phone. She was looking directly at Damien Moretti as he slowly turned his head. His eyes, the shade of an approaching storm, were piercing and cold. He no longer registered Lucas. He dismissed the multi-million-dollar negotiation. His entire consciousness was fixed, the quivering server who had just addressed New York's most feared man as baby amidst a raw display of dominance. Damien did not elevate his voice. He made no move for a weapon. He simply relaxed back in his chair, a slow, predatory curve forming on his lips. It was a look of lethal curiosity. "I beg your pardon," Damien inquired, his voice dropping to a silken threat. Evelyn's veins filled with ice. She scrambled to mute the earpiece, her face aflame. I am profoundly sorry, sir. I did not intend to." Damien lifted a hand, halting her fragmented apology. He rose to his full stature, his form casting a shadow over her. At over 6'3", he gave off an intense energy and authority that made her feel unsteady. He invaded her personal space, pinning her against the table with his presence alone. He leaned close, his mouth near her ear, and she caught the scent of sandalwood and imminent danger. "Do not apologize," he whispered, just loud enough for Lucas and his crew to overhear. "Say it again, slower." Evelyn's lungs ceased to function. Her thoughts raced for a way out, but she was cornered. To her left, Damien's second, a scarred man named Matthew, observed her with clinical eyes. To her right, 2 other guards foreclosed any path of retreat. Sir, I implore you," Evelyn pleaded, her voice a mere tremor. "It was a misunderstanding. I was on a call with—" "On a call?" Damien drew back slightly, his gaze dissecting her expression. He registered her terror, but also detected a filament of steel beneath it. She was not weeping. She was calculating. This intrigued him. Damien pivoted to Lucas, who remained frozen in astonishment. "Lucas, leave. This negotiation is terminated. If I discover your men near the Brooklyn Navy Yard again, I will not dispatch a messenger. I will dispatch a hearse." Lucas began to protest, but a single glare from Damien choked the words. The rival boss gathered his documents and fled, casting one final mystified look at the waitress who had seemingly pacified the beast. With the area secured, Damien reclaimed his seat and gestured to the one Lucas had abandoned. "Sit." "I am unable to," Evelyn replied, her fingers gripping the tray. Your manager reports to the owner of this establishment. The owner of this establishment reports to me. Sit." Evelyn sat. Damien poured 2 snifters of the Louis XIII cognac, pushing one toward her. "You have just averted significant bloodshed, Kara." Lucas was playing for time. He perceived me as stressed, vulnerable, but you— A low, dark laugh escaped him. "You led him to believe I am so untouchable. I allow my mistress to serve beverages during a high-stakes meeting." "I am not your mistress." Evelyn stated, her voice regaining its firmness. And I must go. My niece is in the hospital. She is the person I was speaking with. Damien paused, his glass held before his lips. The baby. She is 5 years old. She requires an operation. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes once more. I accepted this position for the initial payment. So if your intention is to execute me for my insubordination, please be efficient. I have another place I need to be. Damien regarded her. He had spent 2 decades assessing people. He knew she was speaking the unvarnished truth. His eyes fell to her scuffed shoes, the worn edge of her uniform, the raw terror in her hazel eyes. He produced a slim black phone and made a call. Matthew, Damien began, his gaze fixed on Evelyn. Contact Saint? Jude's and Mount Sinai. Locate a... He paused, glancing at Evelyn. Family name. Vance, she whispered. Lily Vance. Determine which hospital is treating Lily Vance. Settle her account in its entirety and transfer her to a private room. Evelyn inhaled sharply. What? No, I cannot permit you to do that. What is your cost? Damien concluded the call, placing the phone on the table. Because you are now indebted to me, and my debts are never insignificant. Indebted to you? Evelyn echoed, her voice sharp with disbelief. You just acknowledged that I prevented a violent confrontation. You also publicly neutered a rival Don, which means Lucas is now investigating your life. He will be intrigued. When he discovers you are merely a waitress, he will realize I manipulated him. He will make you a target to reach me. Damien leaned forward, his expression hardening. You are now a part of this world, Miss Vance, whether by your design or not. Evelyn felt the room begin to spin. So, what is it that you require of me? I require a diversion, Damien stated with detached calm. The Russo family is becoming more hostile. They perceive me as isolated, lacking an heir, a wife, any personal vulnerability. They believe they can advance on my territory because I have no weakness. He sipped his cognac. I need them to believe I have one. A new fixation, someone under my protection. It will make them careless, which will in turn allow me to destroy them. Evelyn shook her head. You want me to feign being your girlfriend? Not girlfriend, Damien amended as he stood and buttoned his jacket. My betrothed. The proposition was an absurdity. You are delusional, Evelyn countered, rising to meet his gaze. I am a student of the law with a life of my own. I am not playing a domestic role for a syndicate leader. Damien was unmoved. Your niece's procedure cost $80,000. It is handled, he continued, and Lucas Russo's operatives are positioned outside. Should you depart alone, you will not reach the subway. He extended his hand to her. It was large, marked by calluses and absolute. 6 months, Evelyn, reside in my penthouse, wear the attire I provide, be present at the functions I designate. Become the woman who subdued Damien Moretti. In return, your niece receives the finest medical attention. Your student debt is erased, and you will leave with $5 million. Her gaze was drawn to his hand, an anchor in the storm of her circumstance. This was the archetypal pact with darkness, yet external forces were conspiring against her, a tempest gathering over the metropolis. A message from her friend Sarah confirmed Lily was in a VIP suite awaiting a procedure, a text that served as both a reprieve and a silent indictment of her choices. Evelyn's eyes met the cold tempest gray of Damien's, acknowledging the point of no return. Her thoughtless remark about the child had sealed this covenant. She placed her hand in his. 6 months, she stated, a frail attempt to define the terms, and any non-consensual physical contact nullifies the agreement. A subtle smirk, the classic signature of a narcissist, played on Damien's lips as he enveloped her hand. "I will have no need to compel you, Evelyn," he uttered, drawing her infinitesimally closer. "Before 6 months have passed, you will be the one to solicit my touch." The journey to Damien's residence was shrouded in a dense, psychodramatic silence. Positioned in the rear of a fortified escalade, a leather console served as a demarcation line between their two worlds. Through the tinted windows, Evelyn saw the city's luminescence bleed into abstract art, from the chaotic energy of Times Square to the deep umbra of Hell's Kitchen, resolving finally into the crystalline spires of Central Park South. She observed her own trembling hands, a physical manifestation of her mounting existential crisis. An hour prior, her anxieties revolved around gratuities and midterms. Now she was seated next to a figure from redacted federal dossiers. "Cease your shaking," Damien commanded, his attention fixed on a tablet bathing his sculpted jaw in a blue radiance. "Fear possesses a distinct aroma, Evelyn. In my sphere, it attracts predators." "I am not afraid of you," Evelyn breathed, a fabrication so fragile it was nearly transparent. With a measured, deliberate motion, Damien pivoted toward her. He reached across the divide, tucking a stray lock of her hair into place. The warmth from his fingertips was a stark contrast against her chilled skin. "Excellent. Because at this moment I am the singular element of safety in your life. It is the rest of the world that should now be your primary concern." The escalade glided into a subterranean private garage resembling a bank vault, defined by concrete barriers, steel doors, and uniformed sentinels standing at attention. "Welcome to your new home, Bella," Damien murmured as her door was unlatched. The penthouse was a citadel in the heavens, a vast expanse of glass and steel that constituted the entire apex of the Millennium Tower. The aesthetic was a trinity of glass, steel, and black marble, exquisite, sterile, and as bereft of warmth as the man who owned it. "An associate named Matthew will retrieve your possessions from your flat," Damien announced, casting his keys onto a marble island that cost more than her tuition. "My flatmates," Evelyn began to object. "They will be under the impression you received a last-minute scholarship for foreign study. The university has been informed you are on an official academic sabbatical." Evelyn whirled to face him. "You manipulated my university's official records." "I endowed a new library. The outcome is identical." Damien approached the panoramic window overlooking the park. He loosened his necktie, the first recognizably human gesture she had witnessed from him. "We must establish protocols, Evelyn," he said, turning back to her. "First, you are not to exit this residence unless I or Matthew accompany you. Second, you will not answer your mobile unless I have authorized the caller. Third, we occupy the same bedchamber." Evelyn felt the oxygen evacuate her lungs. "That was not part of the arrangement. I specified no physical contact." "I stated I would not initiate contact without your consent," Damien clarified, his approach as fluid and predatory as he closed the gap between them. "But the household staff is a constant presence, domestics, security. If they observe us in separate quarters, the story will unravel. If the story unravels, Lucas Russo will know this is a performance. If Lucas knows, he will arrange for your elimination." He paused mere inches from her. "Therefore, we share a bed. It is a king-sized mattress." He delineates her territory with a threat. a clear boundary between safety and peril. His gaze shifts to her mouth as he adds, "And my civility is not guaranteed." A nervous pulse thrums in Evelyn's throat. She counters, "Agreed, but I will be wearing flannel pajamas, the most unappealing I own." A coarse, unused laugh escapes Damien's chest. "We attend a gala tomorrow, the St. Clair Foundation event, the social apex of the year. The entire power structure will be present. Officials, judiciary, and the heads of the 5 major syndicates." Tomorrow? A crash course in being a mafioso's consort in 24 hours is impossible. You are intelligent, a law student. Your profession is human analysis. Observe them with the same intensity you used to command me. A flush rises on Evelyn's face. "That was unintentional." "Was it?" Damien probes. "Or did the exercise of control appeal to you?" An older, powerfully built woman enters then, holding a garment bag. "Signora Ricci," Damien acknowledges her with deference. "Prepare her." The Signora subjects Evelyn to a severe, appraising stare. Too slight, too American, but possessing a good foundation. She claps decisively. "Let us begin, Piccolola. One who consorts with the devil must present as a queen." The subsequent 12 hours were a period of intense, meticulous reinvention. Under the watch of Signora Ricci, a despot armed with measuring tape, Evelyn was polished, sculpted, and refined. When she faced the mirror the following evening, the reflection was of a stranger. The gown was fashioned from a deep sanguine silk that molded to her form like a second epidermis. The cut was audaciously low along the spine, with a slit ascending high upon her thigh. Her hair cascaded in timeless, glamorous waves, and a diamond necklace sparkled at her throat, its weight feeling akin to a restraint. "Perfection!" a voice resonated from the doorway. Evelyn turned to find Damien leaning against the jamb, clad in a faultless tuxedo. He appeared impossibly refined, yet the grip of a firearm visible in his shoulder holster served as a brutal reminder of his true nature. He traversed the room to position himself behind her, their images converging in the mirror. He was the shadow to her light. "One final detail," he whispered, retrieving a ring from his pocket. It was a platinum setting that held a diamond the size of a robin's egg. He slid it onto her finger. The fit was exact. "It belonged to my mother," he stated, his tone devoid of emotion. "Do not misplace it." She dispatched the last individual who attempted to take it from her. "How reassuring," Evelyn murmured, her eyes fixed on the brilliant jewel. "Damien, what if I fail at this?" "You will not." He turned her to face him, his hands gripping her waist. "Simply recall this. Tonight, you are mine. You are not Evelyn the server. You are Evelyn Moretti, the future matriarch to the Capo dei Capi. Allow them to witness your spirit." He presented his arm. "Shall we proceed to battle, darling?" Inhaling deeply, Evelyn summoned her courage and took his arm. "Do not call me darling." "Compel me," he smirked, guiding her toward the elevator. The St. Clair Gala was hosted at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Within, the Temple of Dender was bathed in soft, aureate light, an ancient stage for the city's most lethal predators, cloaked in designer armor. As Damien and Evelyn emerged from the limousine, they were met with a blinding onslaught of camera flashes. The paparazzi clamored for Damien's attention, desperate for an image of the reclusive magnate and his enigmatic companion. "Head high," Damien murmured, his hand a firm presence at the small of her back. "Project an air of indifference. It infuriates them." Evelyn lifted her chin, adopting the cool, detached expression of a high-fashion model. She felt Damien's thumb caress her hip through the silk, a grounding gesture that sent a current of electricity through her. The atmosphere inside was heavy with the fragrance of lilies and inherited wealth. A string quartet performed, though their melody was largely consumed by the murmur of 100 private dialogues. As they navigated the great hall, a corridor seemed to manifest before them as if by divine intervention. Men offered deferential nods. Women exchanged whispers behind their champagne flutes, their expressions a cocktail of envy and disdain. "Moretti," a resonant voice called out. Damien's frame tensed for an instant before he settled into a mask of casual composure. "Senator, a pleasure to see you." Senator Reeves, a figure Evelyn recognized from news coverage of his hardline anti-crime policies, clasped Damien's hand with warmth. "And who is this remarkable woman?" Damien inquired, drawing her fractionally closer. "This is Evelyn, my fiancée." A shadow of incredulity flickered across the senator's features. "Fiancée? I was unaware you were predisposed to matrimony, Damien. I assumed your sole bride was your enterprise." "Meeting Evelyn altered my perspective," Damien countered smoothly. Evelyn offered her hand with a polite smile. "It is an honor, Senator. I've been monitoring your zoning reform bill with great interest. Clause 14 is quite audacious, although its eminent domain clauses present certain constitutional challenges, in my view." The senator was palpably stunned. Damien looked down at her, his face a blend of authentic astonishment and pride. "The woman is well-versed," the senator finally articulated. "She is exceptional," Damien amended, his voice absolute. "And a student of the law." As they moved on, Damien leaned in, his breath warm near her ear. "Clause 14, a bit theatrical." "I maintain a perfect 4.0 grade point average, Damien. I am more than mere window dressing." "I am beginning to appreciate that fact." Well, what a charming domestic tableau." The voice was a sibilant poison that hung in the air. Evelyn felt Damien's body become rigid as granite beside her. They turned to see Lucas Russo, a martini glass poised in his hand. Beside him stood his son, Antonio, a cruder iteration of his sire, whose gaze conducted a vulgar and invasive appraisal of Evelyn's figure. "Lucas," Damien acknowledged, his nod carrying the weight of a direct threat. Here the battlefield is social, and Lucas's smirk is the opening salvo, his words confirming the currency of gossip. He frames Evelyn as a commodity, an acquisition polished for display. The question of the dress's cost is a thinly veiled inquiry into her market value, immediately devalued by his own estimation. Damien's surge is the predictable response of challenged masculinity, halted by Evelyn's intervention. The first sign she is not a liability, but a strategic asset. She steps into the confrontation, assuming a position of power, and weaponizes her identity with a voice of chilling precision. Her claim, making Damien Moretti say please, redefines her worth not in dollars, but in a unique psychological influence, a stark contrast to the transactional power Lucas comprehends. A profound silence follows, marking the successful deployment of her counteroffensive. Antonio Russo's guttural reaction underscores the impact of the blow. Damien remains a study in stillness, save for the subtle twitch that betrays his inner turmoil. The crimson tide flooding Lucas's face is the classic tell of a narcissist's wound. His retort, a threat wrapped in a condescending metaphor, attempts to reassert dominance. At this, Damien's carefully constructed persona disintegrates, exposing the predator beneath. He reframes the situation. A public threat against his future wife nullifies all pretense of civility. The mention of the senator serves to highlight how utterly he is willing to shatter the social order. Lucas's clenched jaw signals a tactical retreat, his final gaze at Evelyn not just a look, but an unambiguous promise of future conflict. Damien's critique of her astonishing desire to die reveals his own paradigm: survival through control, a paradigm she has just violated. His grip is both proprietary and protective as he steers her away. Evelyn's defense of her actions is dismissed. In his world, her role is not to engage, but to survive under his protection. The whiskey is a tool to manage his own frayed control. His assessment of Lucas as reptilian and desperate is a cold calculation of his enemy's psychological state, identifying desperation as a multiplier of danger. His constant environmental scanning, exits, hands, reflections, is the mark of a man for whom paranoia is a survival mechanism. The demand to dance is not romantic, but tactical, a necessary performance to maintain the illusion of intimacy for their observer on the balcony. He orchestrates their transition to the dance floor with practiced efficiency, a general moving his keypiece. As they join the waltz, his hand on her back is a conduit for absolute control, guiding her with an almost preternatural grace. For Evelyn, this choreographed intimacy creates a momentary pocket of oblivion where the violent realities of their contract cease to exist. All that remains is the kinetic truth of their bodies moving as one, a synchronicity that feels both new and deeply primal. Her observation about his skill is a probe into his past, seeking the man beneath the monster. His reply, attributing the lessons to his mother's rigid philosophy on leadership, offers a rare glimpse into the codes that shaped him. His gaze then drops, the intensity signaling a shift from public performance to private confrontation. The word she used, baby, hangs between them, a challenge she softly renews. His warning, don't, is strained, a testament to the effort it takes to maintain his composure. Her explanation of speaking to her niece is a calculated piece of plausible deniability. He dismisses it, focusing on the true target of her gaze, him. This forces a moment of profound vulnerability, the air crackling with unspoken tension. His response, "Perhaps you saw something in me that wasn't a monster," is the central question of his existence, a hope he barely dares to entertain. Her whispered reply, "I haven't decided yet," keeps him suspended between man and beast. Suddenly, his body becomes rigid, a predator's instinct overriding all else. His focus shifts, tracking a dissonant element in the environment. A waiter whose movements betray a lethal purpose, his hand concealed beneath velvet cloth. The command, "Get down," is not a request, but a primal roar. His immediate action is to transform Evelyn from a partner into an object to be moved, shoving her out of the line of fire. The silence shots are a cold, intimate violence, their impact marked by the shattering of an ephemeral ice sculpture. The ensuing screams signaled the complete collapse of the event's civilized veneer. Amid the chaos, Evelyn sees Damien, moving not in retreat but on the offensive, closing the distance to the threat. The assassin's attempt to re-aim is futile. Damien's counter is a brutal symphony of violence. A wrist broken with sickening finality, the weapon neutralized. A knee to the gut and a throat slammed against marble complete the total incapacitation of his foe. His question, "Who sent you?" is bellowed with a force that seems to command the room itself. The assassin's fumbling for a knife is met with overwhelming and decisive force. Damien produces his own firearm and uses it not to shoot, but as a bludgeon, an act of visceral, personal dominance. The man collapses. As the room descends into peak chaos, with security swarming and guests fleeing, Damien's primal fury gives way. He scans the maelstrom, his gaze a searchlight seeking its single purpose. The moment his eyes find Evelyn huddled amidst the debris, the warrior evaporates, replaced by the stark, unveiled terror of a man confronting his greatest fear. He holsters his weapon, the act signaling a complete shift in priority from neutralizing threats to rendering aid. He collapses to his knees beside her, his frantic search for injury a raw display of his terror. Her stammered assurance is not enough. His world narrows to the cut on her arm, his expression hardening into a terrifying darkness. The pocket square becomes an impromptu bandage, a small act of order in the chaos. His call for Matthew is the roar of a king summoning his lieutenant. Matthew's report confirms a lone shooter and the Russos' convenient disappearance. Damien's order to leave is absolute, his authority unquestioned. His command to burn the place down is a metaphor for his willingness to destroy anything to ensure their escape. He lifts Evelyn, her weight insignificant to him, and she instinctively seeks refuge in his proximity, the scent of gunpowder and sandalwood, a strange perfume of their reality. Her whispered, "You saved me," is an acknowledgement of the debt just incurred. His growled response, "I protect what's mine," is not a comfort but a declaration of ownership, framing Russo's act as a fatal trespass. As sirens wail in the distance, Evelyn grasps a new reality. The performance is over. Their fake engagement has been consecrated in real violence. This is now a war, and the most terrifying realization is not the danger, but the profound sense of safety she feels clinging to her protector. The safe house is a fortress, a brutalist monument to paranoia perched above a violent sea, its architecture a mirror of Damien's own mind. The 3 hours since the gala have been a void of silent contemplation. He had placed her in the master bathroom, a cold chamber of slate and linen with a single raw command, "Sit." She obeys, her body finally succumbing to the delayed shock of the evening's events. A tremor begins, the physical manifestation of trauma taking hold. Her gown, once a symbol of their charade, is now a tattered record of the violence. Damien engages in a ritual of purification, scrubbing the assassin's blood from his hands with a methodical fury, the water running red. His refusal to meet her gaze is an act of self-flagellation. To look at her would be to confront the terror he authored. He dries his hands and retrieves a medical kit. Kneeling before her, he mirrors his posture from the gala, but the context has shifted from public threat to private penance, the space between them now heavy with a soul-crushing guilt. "Show me your arm," he whispers, the softness of his voice belying the weight of his command. She complies. Though the cut is minor, it represents a catastrophic failure of his control. As the antiseptic stings, she recoils and he freezes. "Forgive me," he murmurs, his hands instruments of lethal force, now trembling with regret. His apology is not for the physical pain, but for the entire ordeal. "This wasn't you," she counters, but he rejects her absolution. "All the blame for this is mine." He focuses on his task, confessing his hubris. He used her as a decoy, an arrogant gambit that failed spectacularly. He finishes his work, and when he finally meets her gaze, his eyes are a storm of gray regret. "Our agreement is canceled." Evelyn's response is a silent, uncomprehending blink. What follows is a clinical severance. He lays out her escape: a car, a private flight to a Swiss chalet, a gilded prison designed for her safety. He promises a new identity, a fresh start, and a lifetime of financial support for her niece, all predicated on one condition: their complete and total separation. He turns his back, unable to witness the impact of his verdict. His posture is that of a man convinced he is a contagion, severing a limb to save the body. He has judged himself a poison. Yet Evelyn's memory holds a different truth. The man who shielded her, the man who moved with lethal speed to protect her. In this moment, a lesser woman might have chosen escape. The ticket to Switzerland represented a rational exit from a life of impossible danger. But Evelyn Vance was forged in adversity, her entire life a struggle against overwhelming forces. Running was not in her nature. She rises, closes the distance, and places a hand on his back. The contact makes him flinch as if burned. No, she states the word a quiet declaration of war. He turns, his disbelief absolute. Do you not understand me? They shot at you. Her reply is not emotional but strategic, a sharp analysis of their enemy's psychology. Her disappearance, she argues, would be a victory for Lucas, a signal of Damien's weakness that would only invite a more ferocious attack. And he will eliminate me regardless, for I am an untied thread. My protection is more effective from afar, Damien countered, his fury a thin veil for his terror. And who is there to protect you? Evelyn's voice shot back. The ensuing silence was profound and absolute. Damien simply gazed at her, stunned. You possess armed men, Damien. You command a force. Yet you have no one who is invested in your survival. You exist in complete isolation. Evelyn moved closer, violating his personal space. I will not be moved. Our arrangement stands. 6 months. I honor my commitments. Damien looked down at her, at the resolve burning in her eyes. He felt a fissure form in a fortress he had erected 2 decades prior, on the day he watched his father die. You are an exceptionally reckless woman, he murmured. His statement, however, was devoid of any genuine malice. And you have a glaring blind spot, she retorted. You've never once inquired if I have eaten. A strangled noise, a hybrid of a laugh and a groan, tore from him. He reached for her, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the curves of her cheeks. Evelyn, he began, his voice descending into a deep, authoritative rumble. Remain here, and I will set the world ablaze before I permit them to harm you again. All right, she exhaled. He drew nearer. The space that separated them crackled with energy. His lips paused mere inches from hers, a silent inquiry, awaiting her retreat. When she held her ground, her eyelids fluttering shut, he closed the remaining gap. The kiss was not one of tenderness, it was a force of nature. It held the taste of whiskey and the raw brink of existence. Damien kissed her as a man deprived of oxygen, and she was his solitary gasp of air. His hands tangled in her hair, drawing her body flush to his. Evelyn coiled her arms around his neck, leveraging her own weight to ground him. For an instant, the world beyond, the syndicate, the conflict, the bloodshed, dissolved, supplanted by the intensity of 2 souls who had confronted mortality and resolved to stand as one. Damien was the first to pull away, his breathing labored, his forehead against hers. Get some sleep, he ordered, his voice tight. 1 more minute in your presence, and I will violate my 6-month term. Evelyn's heart pounded. She wished for him to break it, but she offered only a nod. Good night, Damien. He strode to the doorway, pausing with his hand on its frame. Secure this, "Do not open it for anyone but me." 3 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. The conflict with the Russos devolved into a strained stalemate, a psychological war of attrition more taxing than open battle. The syndicate was hemorrhaging assets. Convoys were intercepted. Federal incursions on Damien's holdings occurred with uncanny precision. They had returned to the city, but the penthouse was now a gilded cage. Damien had effectively ceased sleeping. His nights were consumed in the study with his trusted advisors, Matthew, his chief enforcer, and Victorio, the syndicate's counsel. Evelyn had been relegated to the periphery, fulfilling the role of the beautiful, damaged fiancée. But Evelyn was never one to be marginalized. While Damien convened his war councils, she conducted her own inquiries in the library. Her focus was not on fiction, but on the corporate records Damien maintained on the secure network. She had uncovered an anomaly. It was a Tuesday evening. A ferocious storm assaulted New York, rain lashing against the panoramic glass. The atmosphere inside the henhouse was suffocating. "We lost another convoy in Jersey," Matthew reported, his tone subdued. He stalked the length of the study, a glass of scotch in his hand. The authorities were waiting. They had the precise container identification, Damien, the exact one. Damien remained on the leather sofa, his gaze locked on the cold hearth. He appeared utterly drained. Only 3 individuals were privy to that container number: myself, you, and Victorio. Victorio, an elegant man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that cost as much as a small vehicle, gestured dismissively, and the director of the Port Authority. "The Russo family possesses considerable wealth, Damien. They could have easily suborned him." "That director has been in my employ for 10 years, Damien countered sharply. "He understands I would flay him for a lesser offense." "Then the breach is within our own ranks," Matthew stated, his hand reflexively going to his weapon. "We must conduct a purge, beginning from the lowest level." "The breach is not at the lowest level." The voice drifted from the top of the spiral staircase. All 3 men pivoted. Evelyn stood there. She was dressed in one of Damien's large shirts, wearing her glasses and clutching a thick sheaf of printed documents. "Evelyn, return to your room," Damien commanded, his voice sharp as steel. "This does not involve you." "You are failing because you seek a traitor in the ranks," Evelyn said, descending the staircase. She paid no mind to the dangerous light in Damien's eyes. She marched directly to the coffee table and set the papers down with a solid thud. "You ought to be searching for a bookkeeper." Victorio emitted a condescending laugh. "My dear, perhaps you should focus on spending Damien's fortune. Leave the substantive matters to the men." Evelyn fixed Victoria with a gaze she typically reserved for difficult academics. "I am a paralegal, Victorio. I specialize in corporate malfeasance and forensic accounting, and to be blunt, your shell corporations are amateurish." The room descended into absolute silence. Damien sat up, his posture suddenly rigid. "Elucidate." Evelyn arranged the documents. I was unoccupied, so I began examining the acquisition records for the warehouse assets, specifically the shell entity for the Jersey depot. It's a Cayman-registered firm named Moretti Holdings. It appears legitimate, she noted, indicating a highlighted passage. However, the corporation's annual registration dues are not drawn from the primary account. They are paid from another limited liability company called Janus Global. "And so," Matthew interjected, clearly bewildered. "And so," Evelyn continued, gaining momentum, "I investigated Janus Global. It is a phantom company, but the Internet Protocol address from its digital tax filings traces back to a residence in Scarsdale. She angled her head slowly to look at Victorio. Victorio, don't you own a weekend home in Scarsdale? Victorio's face lost all color. He sprang from his chair. This is preposterous. She has been hacking our confidential records, Damien. She represents a security risk. She is correct, Damien stated softly. His gaze was fixed on Victorio, not on the documents. The Internet Protocol address, is it registered in your name? Damien, I served your father. I have served you for my entire career, Victorio stammered, backing away. The container number, Evelyn interjected, her tone unforgiving. It was included on the legal manifest for the insurance filing. Victorio is responsible for managing the insurance. Damien rose. The apex predator had re-emerged in the room. He advanced slowly on the man who had been a surrogate uncle to him. Why? Damien asked, his voice low. Victorio was pressed against the wall. He was trembling. Russo! He offered me an exit strategy. Immunity. The government's case is gaining traction, Damien. The racketeering charges are going to be upheld. I would not perish in a cell. For that you betrayed me. Damien's voice was utterly devoid of emotion. You betrayed my people. You betrayed her. She is insignificant, Victorio spat, gesturing frantically at Evelyn. A common server, a dalliance. You are becoming sentimental, Damien. She has made you vulnerable. Victorio's hand moved toward his jacket. Do not, Damien warned. But Victorio was already producing the pistol. Before he could aim it, a solitary, explosive gunshot echoed through the penthouse. Victorio collapsed to his knees, a stunned expression on his face before falling forward onto the Persian carpet. Evelyn cried out, pressing her hands to her ears. Damien stood motionless, his arm outstretched, a thin tendril of smoke curling from the barrel of his silver firearm. He had not wavered for an instant. He remained completely steady. Matthew's voice broke the silence, confirming the neutralization. Threat is eliminated, boss! Yet Damien's weapon stayed level, his focus locked on the traitor's body. At last he pivoted to face Evelyn. She was quaking, her eyes fixed on the deceased man. Reholstering his firearm, Damien approached her, anticipating she would recoil. He had just dispatched a man in their living space. Evelyn, he began, his voice measured. She looked up, her face pale, but her expression resolute. Her gaze shifted from the body to him. He was about to kill you, she stated, her tone flat. Yes, which means you had no other option. A ragged breath escaped Damien. He gathered her into his arms, immersing his face in the aroma of vanilla and rain that lingered in her hair. She represented the last vestige of purity in his tainted existence. You discovered the infiltrator, he whispered against her hair. You have rescued us once more. I told you, she murmured against his chest, her fingers bunching the fabric of his shirt. I am more than mere decoration. He pulled back, his look a fusion of reverence and a raw, untamed desire. The rush of the confrontation and the sharp relief of survival created a potent chemistry inside him. Matthew, Damien ordered, his gaze unwavering from Evelyn. Clean this location. Mobilize the men. We possess Russo's entire strategy now. This evening, we conclude this conflict. Understood, boss, Matthew affirmed, already moving the body. Damien grasped Evelyn's hand. Accompany me. He guided her past the panic room directly toward their bedroom. He slammed the door shut, the mechanism audibly locking. A gale howled outside, yet the storm within them was infinitely more powerful. "You just witnessed me take a man's life," Damien said, trapping her against the door, "and you did not flee." "I am finished with fleeing," Evelyn managed to say. She reached up, her fingers working at his collar. Her hands trembled, but not from fright. A deep guttural sound rumbled from Damien's chest. He claimed her mouth in a kiss that was nearly an act of aggression. Hoisting her up, he locked her legs around his waist and strode to the bed. "Voice it," he commanded against her neck as they fell onto the mattress. "Voice what?" she gasped. He pulled back, his eyes like embers burning into hers. "Tell me my name for you," she demanded. "The one that binds you to me." Evelyn wove her fingers through his dark hair, drawing his world into hers. "Baby," came the whisper. In that moment, Damien Moretti, the architect of New York's fear, was fundamentally deconstructed. The war for his empire was not won by force, but by a sound that barely registered. The Janus Global files, unearthed by Evelyn, were more than just evidence of betrayal. They were the cartography of Lucas Russo's entire shadow state, detailing illicit accounts, bribery networks, and the precise coordinates of his sanctuary in the Catskills. Damien did not dispatch an army. He went himself with Matthew and a surgical team of 4, bringing Evelyn to the threshold of violence, compelling her to witness. From the sanctuary of an armored vehicle, she observed the ensuing purge on a tactical display, a detached god watching heat signatures breach the compound. Here, she witnessed the brutal efficiency of the Moretti machine, a 20-minute symphony of controlled violence. Then, a voice through the static. "Compound secure, escort her up." The SUV ascended the snow-laden path toward the lodge. As Evelyn emerged, the air, a sharp mixture of pine and cordite, assaulted her senses. At the doorway, Matthew stood, securing his weapon. "He's waiting in the study," he informed her. "Damien requires you to see the conclusion, to understand its finality." Evelyn entered the study, where a fireplace cast a warm, almost blasphemous glow against the fresh violence outside. At the room's epicenter knelt Lucas Russo, broken but lucid. Damien presided over him, a glass of Russo's own scotch swirling in his hand. His focus shifted to Evelyn, the hard facade of the dawn momentarily cracking, his eyes reserving their softness for her alone. "Evelyn," Damien's voice was a flat line, "approach." She stood beside him, his proximity an unspoken shield. Damien then redirected his focus to his vanquished foe. "You recall Evelyn, don't you? The server you deemed less valuable than her attire." Lucas expelled a mix of blood and defiance onto a priceless rug. "Damn you, Moretti! This resolves nothing. The commission is aware you plundered their pension funds," Damien interrupted. "Evelyn discovered the transactions. You've been exsanguinating your own ranks, Lucas. There is no rescue party. You are utterly alone." Russo's gaze shot to Evelyn, a primal fear finally blooming within him. "The woman found it." "The Queen found it," Damien corrected, lowering himself to meet the man's gaze. "You have a choice, Lucas, a magnanimous one. Sign over your territories and vanish, or," Damien tapped the glass, "we can conclude the affair from the gala." Lucas's gaze flickered between the pistol on the desk and Damien, finally settling on the contract Matthew presented. His hand trembled as he signed away his life's work. Damien rose. "A prudent choice. Matthew, remove him. If he's in this city at dawn, he's a dead man." With Russo's removal, the atmosphere depressurized. The war was concluded. The Russo dynasty was dismantled. The Moretti Empire stood unchallenged. Yet one final contract remained unresolved. 2 days later, the 6-month term expired. The penthouse was still as rain began to cleanse the city's veneer. Evelyn was packing. She wasn't packing the couture and jewels Damien provided, but the artifacts of a former self: denim, sweaters, and worn footwear. The sound of the front door broke the silence. Damien entered, a manila envelope in hand. He froze, observing the suitcase on the bed, a nerve twitching in his jaw. "You are leaving," he stated, a fact, not a question. "It has been 6 months, Damien," she replied, her gaze fixed on a shirt she folded with unsteady hands. "The agreement is fulfilled. You have won. You are no longer in danger." Damien approached, setting the envelope down. "Your compensation, $5 million, untaxed, transferred to a Swiss account with the deed to a Parisian flat. It is completely furnished." Evelyn looked at the envelope. It contained the very concept of freedom she had once craved: security for her niece, a life reborn. "Thank you," she managed, her voice a faint echo. "You honored the terms," Damien said, his tone devoid of any color. "The fortifications are back in place. You were an effective deterrent." "Was that my only function?" Evelyn asked, her eyes finally locking with his. Damien turned away, moving toward the window. "It was the role you accepted." "That is not what I am asking." Damien's knuckles whitened against the windowsill. "Evelyn, just depart. Take the assets and go. This world is not for you. You witnessed my actions against Victoria, against Lucas. I am a predator. This stain on my soul is permanent." "I am aware," Evelyn responded. She moved to stand directly behind him. "But you never compelled me to remain. You never forced me to uncover those records. I made that choice." "You chose to ensure your own survival." Damien pivoted, his gaze intense. "But mere survival is no longer your only option. You can truly live. Find a respectable attorney or a physician, a man who returns at 5 p.m. and has no need to inspect his vehicle for explosives." "I have no desire for a respectable attorney," Evelyn retorted, tears beginning to form. "I desire you." "Why?" Damien's voice fractured with raw anguish. "Why would you choose a life spent watching your back?" "Because when I do," Evelyn's voice broke, "you are the one standing there. Because you protected my niece and demanded nothing in return. Because you perceive me as an equal, not as a possession. Because I love you, you fool." The ensuing silence was dense, punctuated only by the drumming of rain. Damien simply stared, his breathing labored. The most formidable man in New York appeared utterly disarmed by a woman in a common sweatshirt. "You love me," he whispered, the words feeling alien to him. "Yes." Evelyn moved closer, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the violent rhythm of his heart. "I love the monster, and I love the man. I love how you observe me when you believe I am unaware." From her pocket she produced the ring, his mother's, which she had removed for packing. Evelyn pushed the symbolic ring into his hand, issuing a silent ultimatum. "If you truly wish for me to go, Damien, then command it. Tell me this was nothing more than a transaction." Damien looked from the heirloom to her face. His entire defense system catastrophically failed. He cast the ring aside, seizing her in a possessive, crushing hold. He lifted her from the floor in an act of pure dominance that resolved into utter dependency as he buried his face in her neck. "I cannot," he confessed, his voice a raw, guttural sound. I cannot release you. You are my only point of reality, my sole source of light. He lowered her but kept her face framed in his hands, his stare unwavering. If you remain, he warned, his tone becoming lethal. The possibility of retreat had vanished. The Parisian dream was a discarded narrative. You are mine until I cease to exist, and I will incinerate the world for you as a daily ritual. It was a perfect articulation of obsessive ownership. In a classic display of trauma bonding, Evelyn's smile was a balm to her captor. Paris is unnecessary, she breathed. My place is here. Damien retrieved the ring. His hands, which were steady holding a weapon, now trembled as he placed it on her finger. Then stay, he commanded quietly. Marry me. Ascend to become this city's queen. She regarded the symbol of her new bondage, then the man whose violence was her sanctuary. Yes, she agreed. Damien's core narcissism resurfaced, now welded to his pathological fixation. He drew her toward him, his mouth just above hers. A prudent choice, he whispered. Now approach me. Evelyn's laughter was a soft note as she looped her arms around his neck. Say it once more, she challenged. His kiss was an indelible contract. I love you, he murmured against her lips. Is that deliberate enough for you? The union of Damien Moretti and Evelyn Vance was the social event of the decade. They did not retreat into secrecy. They exchanged vows at St. Patrick's Cathedral under the gaze of the entire city. It served as a declaration. The king had secured his queen, making the Moretti dynasty inviolable. Evelyn completed her law degree with the highest honors, forsaking corporate law entirely. She assumed the role of chief counsel for Moretti Legitimate Enterprises, transforming the conglomerate into an impregnable legal fortress. She was the velvet glove that sheathed Damien's iron fist. Years on, inside a club of shadow and obsidian, the music was a physical pulse. From their vantage point at Table 4, New York's ruling pair surveyed their domain. A young waiter approached, his hand shaking as he set a drink near Damien. The glass tipped, spilling its contents on Damien's sleeve. The boy went rigid, snared in the abrupt silence. Damien observed the imperfection, his gaze slowly rising to meet the waiter's. His eyes were glacial, but before a word could be spoken, Evelyn placed a hand on his arm, leaning in to whisper something only he could hear. Damien's expression softened. A slow smirk formed as he looked from his wife to the terrified waiter. Errors occur, Damien stated, his tone neutral. Rectify this and bring my wife another glass of champagne. The young man retreated, his relief a tangible wave. You are becoming sentimental in your old age, Evelyn teased. Damien leaned back, draping an arm around her chair to pull her nearer. I am not sentimental. I merely defer to my superior. Evelyn's laugh echoed through the space, the sound of a woman who had confronted the inferno and claimed it as her own. She had shed the identity of a waitress, confessing a mistake. In her place stood the figure who could tame the devil with her very presence. This is the narrative of how a blunder elevated a server to a position of power in the Mafia. It illustrates that from profound failure can emerge the most significant success, and that even titans possess a fatal weakness. I trust you found this deconstruction of Damien and Evelyn's world engaging. If their volatile dynamic and the ever-present shadow of danger captivated you, please signal your appreciation with like. It is vital for this channel's future. Subscribe and activate notifications to ensure you do not miss our subsequent examinations.
Life lesson. Sometimes the heart does not fall in love with safety. It falls in love with the one person who makes fear bearable. The night did not begin with thunder. It began with velvet curtains, crystal glasses, and the kind of silence that exists only in rooms where men have already imagined each other dead. Light slid across black marble. Cigarette smoke curled lazily toward the ceiling like a ghost too tired to haunt. In the center of that carefully arranged darkness sat a man who had trained the city to whisper his name. Opposite him stood a young woman in a borrowed uniform carrying a tray with both hands as though balance alone could protect her from fate. He looked like granite taught to breathe. She looked like exhaustion in lipstick and cheap shoes, yet tragedy has always adored imbalance. It likes its lovers uneven. It likes to place innocence in the path of power, not because innocence is pure, but because purity glows brighter when the room is full of knives. When the accidental word slipped from her lips, the world seemed to tighten around it. No orchestra rose, no camera shook. There was only stillness, a stillness so complete it felt lit from within. The kind of stillness in which a person understands before anyone moves that life has divided itself into before and after. He should have answered with violence. That would have been easier, cleaner, more consistent with the mythology wrapped around his name, but instead he answered with curiosity. And that is how the tragedy deepened. Not because death stood near her, but because attention did. There are glances more dangerous than bullets. Bullets end scenes. Attention begins stories. In the days that followed, the city turned around them like a cold machine. Elevators climbed silently through towers of steel. Security gates opened like metallic jaws. Dresses were fitted, rings were placed. Lies were rehearsed until they sounded like memory, and through all of it, she moved not like a woman entering fantasy, but like a woman crossing thin ice with her eyes open. Every chandelier above her glittered like a threat. Every polished floor reflected a future she had not chosen. Even luxury in that world had a predatory shine. He meanwhile carried his tenderness like contraband. It appeared in fragments, a hand hovering before touching her wound, a pause before issuing an order, a glance held 1 second too long in the mirror behind her shoulder. He loved as dangerous men often do in cinema. Not gently, but with the stunned desperation of someone who has mistaken survival for living for so long that real feeling arrives like a home invasion. The lesson hidden inside such scenes is not that love conquers darkness. Cinema has lied about that for generations. Darkness does not disappear because two people kiss beside a window while rain bruises the glass. The bodies buried by power do not rise because a wounded man finally confesses that he is lonely. No, the lesson is more fragile and more human. Love can become the first honest mirror a damaged soul has looked into in years. She becomes that mirror for him. Through her eyes, his wealth loses its glamour, his ruthlessness loses its poetry, and his authority loses its innocence. She sees the boy inside the emperor's posture, the child who learned too early that grief must either harden into command or be devoured alive. She sees that beneath the tailored jackets and lethal calm stands a man who has mistaken control for peace because he was never taught the difference. And he becomes a mirror for her as well, though a harsher one. In him, she sees the extremity of her own hunger to protect the people she loves. She sees how desperation can make a bargain with darkness and still call itself noble. She sees that courage is not always clean. Sometimes courage walks into the lion's den, wearing diamonds and pretending not to shake. Sometimes courage is ugly, compromised, exhausted, and terrified. But it still steps forward. The betrayal in the story lands with such force because betrayal is always most devastating when it is domestic. Not merely when an enemy strikes, but when the trusted hand reaches for the hidden gun. A traitor in a hallway is frightening. A traitor at the family table is biblical. That is why the filmic heart of the story feels so grand, almost Greek in its sorrow. The empire does not crack because of a stronger enemy. It cracks because its rot has grown intimate. And then comes the war's end, not as triumph, but as aftermath. Snow, pine, smoke, and cold air. A man brought to his knees, a signature extracted under the gaze of those he tried to destroy, yet even victory feels dim when one has finally learned what it costs to protect something tender in a brutal world. By then, he is no longer fighting only for territory, he is fighting against the possibility that love might be punished simply for existing near him. When the final choice arrives, money or the man, freedom or the fire, the scene does not work because she chooses danger. It works because she chooses truth. She refuses the clean lie. She refuses the convenient version of herself that would walk away untouched. She understands that every future carries risk, and she chooses the one in which her heart is not absent from her own life. That is the lasting lesson of this cinematic telling. Fate rarely sends pure choices. It sends collisions between fear and meaning, between peace and passion, between safety and the one person who has become inseparable from the self that survived the storm. He was not salvation. She was not innocence. They were two flawed souls standing in the wreckage of systems bigger than them, reaching anyway. And in the end, perhaps that is what makes a tragedy worth watching. Not that it avoids ruin, but that amid the ruin, someone still dares to love with both eyes open.